Hey, good morning. I just wanted to share something really quick that I came upon, um, and I don't know, it was so cool. Okay, so after years and years, 40 now, of hearing about the Bible and all the stories in it, it's super easy for me to read and think I know what I'm reading. And so although I'm reading, I can just gloss over the details, and because I know the story, right? So I was in Exodus this morning. I opened up to Exodus 18, and I ended up seeing something. This is where the Israelites are in the desert after the Lord freed them with the plagues. He freed them out of Egypt. Okay, Moses is with them, and in chapter 18, it's where Moses' father-in-law is basically instituting judges, explaining to Moses how he needs to get the heads of the tribes and needs to help them judge. Anyway, things were jumping at me. I'm like, I need to read more. Excuse me. So I flipped back a couple chapters to Exodus 16. And I started reading, and this is the story of manna. Okay, so if you've been in church or in Sunday school growing up, you know the story of the manna, and so I knew it, right? I get it. But get this is so cool. So cool to me. So I'm reading through all of this, and chapter 16 starts where the Israelites, okay, God had just done these ridiculous, this is the thing. This is what he's reminding me. He has done ridiculous miracles in my life. Ridiculous. And yet I forget so often. Oh, he did that. I don't have to worry about this, right? I need to remember. So here is these Israelites who had just literally all these plagues. It was insane. They were sheltered from them all. What happened to the Egyptians did not happen to them. So their water didn't turn to blood. They didn't have flies infesting every nook and cranny of their house. They were safe. Locusts didn't eat their food. They didn't have boils on their skin. When there was darkness, thick darkness for 3 days in Egypt, even though they were in Egypt, they had light, right? None of this makes sense. Darkness so thick you couldn't even light a candle. Otherwise, it wouldn't be real darkness. And it says it was thick. Nobody saw anything. So they had all seen this. Then, after they get out, Pharaoh's army comes after them, and they are cornered up against the Red Sea. They don't know what to do, right? They have no idea. And God tells Moses to lift up his rod or his staff over the sea and parts it, and they walk through on dry ground. Look behind them and see all of Pharaoh's army completely decimated. They have seen this, right? Well, here we are, chapter 16 of Exodus, and they are complaining. Just like I do. Lord, why'd you do this? You brought me out. They brought us out into the desert to kill us. We had all this food before. They're complaining because they're hungry. And I would say they're complaining not only because they're hungry, but because they're I love this, verse 1, and they journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. That word sin, we always think of sin as in doing the wrong thing. Old Testament, that Hebrew word sin is actually the word seen. Interesting, hey? So they come to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they parted from the land of Egypt. So they're in this wilderness of Sin, right above their eyes, and they realize there is nowhere to get food. They have no idea how to get food, and they start complaining, right? Because they're in this desert that's about what they see, and they don't see it. So the Lord is super gracious, and he tells Moses about how he's going to bring bread from heaven, and at night they shall have meat, and they will know the Lord has brought them out, and in the morning they will see the glory of the Lord. So at night they eat the meat, in the morning they're going to eat the bread. They have no idea where this is coming from, right? So we all know the story. Or at least, again, Sunday school kids who grew up in Sunday school and probably have heard it otherwise. But the story is how God literally brought quail. The strong wind brought these quail. I heard a speaker once talk about how thick the quail was and how far, because where they were inland, how far that wind would have had to have blown the quail in. It's unreal. It's unreal. And every night it was there for them. And then every morning when the dew left, there was this thin sheet on the ground that was a bread that they ended up calling manna, which means, what is it, right? Every morning. But Moses told them, just take whatever you need. Take whatever you need, and it'll be enough, but just for that day. And so it says in verse 16, let every man gather according to each one's need, 1 omer for each person. Now, an omer is a tenth of how they would measure things, a tenth of an ephah. So let every man gather according to each one's need, according to the number of people. Let every man take for those who are in his tent. Okay? And the children did so, and they gathered. Verse 17 says, some more, some less. So, in verse 18, when they measured it, those who had gathered much had nothing left over, and he who gathered little had no lack. Every man had gathered according to their need, and when they measured it, it was all a tenth. Interesting, right? Okay. So go with me here. Moses says, leave none till the morning, but some still did, right? Verse 20 says, some of them left it until the morning, but it bred worms and it stank, and Moses was angry with them. So they decided, we're just going to gather it every morning, and we're going to be good. So they did that. Well, then and they were measuring it, and that was what was blowing their mind is, no matter how much they measured, like they thought they needed more, when they measured it, it all ended up being the same until the 6th day. Now get this, verse 22. And so it was on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. So picture this. This is in my imagination. They are freaking out. They're like, the people are still not listening to you. Like, we had worms, and now everybody in the camp, everybody did it, and it all came out to be, we were doing what we thought, and I can just see this, right? And so it was on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread. So verse 23, and then he said to them, Moses tells them, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake today, and boil what you will boil, and lay up for yourselves all that remains to be kept until the morning. Verse 24, so they did. They laid it up until the morning, and it did not stink, nor were there any worms in it. And Moses said, eat that today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you won't find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day there will be none. And it just hit me. You guys, they didn't realize. All they knew was they were to gather it every single day, and it would be enough, and they couldn't save it. But on the 6th day, what they gathered when they thought they were getting the same was more than they could imagine. It was more than they thought they should get. And when they asked about it, that's when they found out, wait, this is the day that we honor the Lord. This is the day that we don't work. Because if you keep going, it goes on to say that because the Lord finished creating the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th he rested, he is now giving men to rest. But I love it that we always talk about the Sabbath, keep it holy, like for those that have a heart for the Lord. We talk about it in the 10 Commandments, right? Which is much after this. And if you're reading chronologically in the Bible speaking, the Lord said, keep my Sabbath, keep it holy, right? And the Jews got so religious about this that they wouldn't even let a person who, like a beggar, they wouldn't even let him like bring his mat out on the Sabbath. They wouldn't let him pick it up or move it because that was considered work. Like, it was just completely legalistic. Well, it's interesting that in chapter 16 is the very first instance where the Lord talks about the Sabbath ever. And when you're reading the Bible, there is, I don't know exactly the word. I'm not going to pretend I went to Bible school, but there's a law that says when you're reading the Bible, law of first mention, I think, where the first place something is mentioned, it's very significant. And this is the first place in the whole Bible that the word Sabbath is listed in this chapter. And I love it because in here, it's nothing about you do this or else. When God instructed his people to have a Sabbath rest, how they realized it was they had double the provision they needed. He provided for them, and then he explained why, because he wanted them to rest. How awesome is this? So often we think unless we rest or unless we do things God's way, he will not bless us and we will not have this crazy big peace. I love that truly, if we watch the way God does it, he rests us. He provides for us. And as we just keep following him, he will show us what it looks like. Like, I can't even imagine the awe. Not only were you providing this, Lord, for them every single day, every single night, and then every single morning, but now they got double and it didn't make any sense. And you were showing them, you don't need to work for this. This is my double blessing for you. So, and I just thought that was pretty sweet. Put that out there for you guys today. If there's any area of your life like mine that I'm looking at it, thinking, maybe there's something left to do. Maybe he's waiting for me. I just want to release that over all of us. And I think the Lord is trying to tell us, rest. Look for my double provision because he is so much better than we realize. Lord, let your grace today do things that we have been trying to figure out how to do ourselves. I believe that your grace is sufficient for us and your power is made perfect in our weakness. So today I will glory, right? Like Paul says, I will therefore more glory in my weaknesses, not because my weaknesses stand, but because where I am weak, then you are strong. You provide things where I have no ability to. And when I look at what I have, I will see double and I will know there is a God in heaven and he has caused me to rest because he is good and he loves me. Have a great one.